You are now tuning in to the Going North podcast with your host, best-selling author, professional speaker, and member of the John Maxwell team, Dominic Dom Brightman. And every Monday and Thursday, we're going to hear the voice of a different author sharing their gifts, stories, and expertise to help you charge forward in life. Now let's get on with the show. And today on the Highlight Reel Builder for Authors, known as the Going North podcast, we got one heck of a guest for today, folks. It's like you have ice cream, a cupcake, and they both have a cherry on top with a banana split on top of both of them to make a skyscraper of sugary awesomeness. We got one heck of a guest for today, my friends. One heck of a guest for today. A Hall of Fame speaker, a CPAE, baby. That's right. One of the most illustrious members of the National Speakers Association, international best-selling author, and much sought-after speaker who also hosts his own wonderful podcast and is known to be the author, or at least the co-author, of one of my favorite books of all time that every elite performer should read, The Go-Giver. So let's give it up for Mr. BB himself, Mr. Bob Burg. How you doing today, sir?
Wow, I'm doing great now. What a fantastic introduction. And at the very beginning of that, when you were talking about cupcakes and banana splits, I mean, those are some of my favorite food groups.
Sweet. Oh, that's good. That wasn't even planned. All right. And again, I guess Willy Wonka the Chocolate Factory is one of your favorite movies. So
Yes,
I guess
it is. You must have heard that podcast. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Love that. Love that movie.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. So such is your favorite food group. I guess we'll just go off the cuff here. Is there a favorite dessert that you prefer over all the others?
You know what? It would have to be something like Oreo cookies or something. I could just like eat those, the double stuff, of course. And yeah, I'm a kind of a simple man. So yeah, that would just about do it.
That's what I'm talking
I
about.
can't keep them
indeed.
in the house though, because I'll actually eat them. I'll go through whatever Oreos are there. So so if I eat them, and I do sometimes, but I have to make the decision to go out to the store and get them as opposed to them being too convenient. That's one of the little disciplines I've enacted into my life to kind of mitigate some of my bad habits, which are junk food and more junk food.
That's right. The JF and the MJF. Gotta avoid the both. Oh my goodness. Well, my man mentioned double stuff, so my man's probably had a double stuff career of the countless people that you help with your books and your speaking. And like
Thank
the
you.
good news is like you're still going strong 60 plus years later. So what keeps you motivated to keep going?
I think it's really that I just enjoy what I do. I think as long as you enjoy your work and you feel you're bringing some value to the table with it, and it feels rewarding to you, I think that's what keeps a person going.
Sweet. That's what I'm talking about indeed. And the beautiful thing about it is, funny enough, if I'm not mistaken, your career actually started off as a TV and radio news broadcaster, and now you have a podcast of your own where you're broadcasting more positivity. So, do you feel like it's kind of like a circle of life?
That's a good point. I hadn't really thought of that. And that when you're doing a podcast, you get to sort of put your own direction toward it. Yours is north, right? And that's a great place to be because it always means we're going in the right direction. And with me, I try to bring my interviews with people are not gotcha type of interviews or particularly controversial. I mean, I'm just interviewing people who've done something really good in some way and just asking them to share about it. And so I enjoy doing that. You get to hear some great stories, and it's really inspiring. And I think the experience I had as a broadcaster, many years ago. I mean, it's been 40 or so years ago now. I think that's helped in kind of understanding how to put together a podcast.
There you go. Almost like peanut butter and jelly, right?
Yeah, another of my favorite food groups. And in the house, I keep neither bread, peanut butter, nor jelly.
Oh man, it might be one of the another one of those rare episodes where the listeners be like, "Oh man, they're making me hungry." But the good news is that's all part of being a go-giver. You're giving folks wonderful value and giving folks great ideas.
Thank
So
you.
by goodness, so with all of your wonderful experience, what's probably been two of the most rewarding lessons you've learned from hosting your podcast?
Oh, wow. It's funny. As we're recording this right now, the current one this week is called Brilliant Resilience, and there were actually two guests, two women who have overcome some real tragic occurrences in life, and they share how to deal with it effectively, how to be brilliantly resilient, and how to come back and be even stronger. And I think that's one of the things that I've noticed with so many of the hosts, that there is this kind of resilience in most of them. And I think, as we study, and I know you study a lot of leaders, and we both probably read a lot of biographies and autobiographies, and that's really something that you see in pretty much every successful person. They've gone through some real yucky stuff, and they just kind of kept going, and they kept going through it, and getting past it, and getting to a place where they turn those things into victories. So I think that's one thing I've learned uh from the many interviews. Trying to think of a second thing. Yeah, I would say that pretty much everyone has who I've interviewed, has a heart for service. I mean, they really are focused on bringing value to their world. Now, they do it in different ways, of course, but they all tend to have something bigger than themselves, that they're aiming for, or aiming to be a part of. And I think as human beings, we are built that way. I think that's been programmed into us. We want to have a reason for living rather than just existing. We want to feel as though we're part of something bigger than ourselves, as though we are bringing value to others. So I think, people who find a way to tap into that are really the happiest.
Ah, yes, indeed. You can say that again. And I bet you probably have a six pack and resilience with the years you've had with your career and everything else, especially learning how to stave off the bad habits, keeping the junk food out the house and all the other good stuff.
Yeah, it's funny. It's gotten more difficult as I've gotten older, and it doesn't seem like it should. It seems like if you set those disciplines in place, they should get easier. And I don't know why. As I've gotten older, it's gotten more difficult to resist some of those things. But I do set up a lot of forced disciplines, if you will. For example, as I also, well, I don't think I mentioned, but aside from my love of junk food, I don't like working out. And when I was younger, I worked out anyway because that's just what you did, and you knew that. But I've had to, I have a personal trainer who she comes to the house every morning at 6 o'clock, and she works me out, and we do it 5 days a week, and I know she's gonna be there, so I am gonna work out. And if she wasn't there, I would not work out. And she also she prepares my meals for the day, healthy meals of what I can eat. So again, it's a forced discipline. I can genuinely tell you that if I did not pay her to come over and do this, I would not work out, and I probably wouldn't eat as healthy. So, sometimes we've got to know our strengths and weaknesses, and where we are at a certain point, and then we hopefully take the proper action.
Sweet. That's what I'm talking about right there. And it's so good. And that just shows a high level of self awareness to be able to do that. It's like, oh,
Mm, thank
I
you.
don't want the B and Bob Burg to stand for belly. Like I need a personal trainer here.
Exactly. Exactly. I think there are three types. We talk about strengths and weaknesses, and we know that it's best, of course, to lead with our strengths. But when you mention self-awareness, part of self-awareness is understanding our weaknesses. And I think there are three basic types of weaknesses. I think there are some that are just, they're the types of weaknesses you really can just ignore because they're not that important. For example, I mean, I don't like running long distances, but at 63 years old and not planning on running a marathon, that's a weakness that I totally ignore, right? I don't care about that weakness. Now, there are some weaknesses we need to mitigate. Now, that would be, again, my eating and my not wanting to work out. I have to mitigate that, because if I didn't and just let that go, I would be much bigger than I should be and very unhealthy. Another natural weakness for me is I don't have a great head for numbers. And so bookkeeping and some of the other business things really aren't my strength. So I don't, I would never be an accountant, and it's not that I focus that much on that with my business. I have people that do that for me, but I know enough. I learned enough to at least know what I need to know. I admit, so there are some weaknesses. Again, you need to mitigate and make sure they don't harm you or those you want to serve. Then there are the weaknesses that we need to turn into strengths if we're going to have an opportunity to be anywhere near as effective as we could be. And this is something that I dealt with quite a while ago, um, when I was about 35 years old, and I realized that there were some character traits that really were not positive in my life. They were negative and they needed to be changed. And I remember a great friend and mentor of mine. His name was Charlie Tremendous Jones, who he's before your time, but he was one of the real kind of motivational speakers of old. You know what I mean? He was just a great, wonderful guy. And in fact, one of his major book, what he was well known for, was called "Life is Tremendous," and so just a great guy. But he sent me a book, which has become one of my all-time favorite books, called "The Autobiography" by Benjamin Franklin, which Benjamin Franklin actually wrote for his son to kind of pass along the lessons of life. And Ben Franklin was a very wise man, and so you can imagine the wisdom in the book. But one chapter in particular was where Dr. Franklin talked about coming to understand that he had certain character traits that were not serving him and serving those around him, and that if he was going to attain the kind of success that he wanted in life, he was going to have to make some changes. So he was an inventor, of course, so he invented his own system, his own self-improvement system. And what he did is he chose 13 different character traits and would take one character trait and work on it for an entire week, where he would dedicate that week to just working, being aware of, working on correcting that bad habit. And at the end of the week, he'd see some real good improvement. Then he would go on to the second character trait and he'd do that one for a week, and then the third. So he'd go through the whole course over 13 weeks, one trade a week. Now, 13 times 4 are 52. There are 52 weeks in the year. So, using Dr. Franklin's methodology, you could actually go through the course 4 times. And what he found was at the end of that year, the character traits he had worked on were just measurably improved. Well, I'm a big person for systems. If someone has proven that something can be done a certain way, I don't feel any need to reinvent the wheel. I'm not that smart. So I would rather tap into someone else's system. So I did the same thing. Some of the traits were actually the same as his, but other ones were more specific to me. And I started doing that. And I took some of my worst character traits and actually turned them into strengths, and it made a huge, huge difference in my life. Some of these were gratitude, that that I saw. I always saw the glass as half full. I looked at the negative and everything, and yet, even as at that time a just kind of starting out successful speaker, I still had a very negative attitude. I did not live in a state of gratitude, and so that was something I worked on and turned it into a strength, which improved my life dramatically, because I believe that unless you have gratitude, you really can't be happy, right? I mean, you can have all the blessings in the world, and I'm not even talking about, toys and boats and planes. I'm talking about, the ability to be able to see and hear and touch, taste, smell, walk, run, just have a cup of coffee, or just all these great things that we have, a roof over our heads, and a meal, meals during the day. And if we can have all these, but if we don't actively appreciate them and have gratitude for them, it's really the same as not having them, and you just can't be happy. So once I made a choice to turn that weakness into a strength, my entire world changed. But there were other ones too. I was a gossiper. I tended to speak ill of people, and that was something that I turned around and, made and it's really a strength of mine. And there's people who will tell you they've never heard me say a bad word about anyone, and I'm not saying that's 100% true. It's not, but it's pretty close. And that's also made a big difference in my life, my peace of mind, and my relationships and success. And there were others as well that were, that I worked on. So I think that we do need to. I think that self-awareness is important, and we need to know where our strengths are and embrace them. And we also need to know what our weaknesses are.
Ah, yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Almost like a brick house of power right there. Definitely got to actively appreciate what you have. I never heard it said that way before, and I love it.
Thank you.
That's right. Who knows? Might be a future social media post for you. The go giver knows how to actively appreciate what they have.
Oh yeah, I've tweeted on that.
Sweet. That's what I'm talking about. And it's so powerful too, just the fact that there's like three types of weaknesses that we all should probably take into consideration. And that third one, just turning them into strengths. And it's just so powerful that you were able to really work on them like that, because I wouldn't, because from afar, just looking and just hearing you speak, I wouldn't think you'd be the person to speak ill of anyone.
Oh, thank you. Well, something that means a lot to me. I appreciate it, and it just goes to show how much I did work on myself, because no, that was very much a weakness of mine, and something I look back on and still feel regret for some of the things I said that were hurtful to people, and so forth.
Amen to that. Amen to that. That's right. A man of his word, baby. A man of his word. Yes,
Mm.
indeed. Heck, even listening to some of your past interviews, even one weakness of turning yourself into a guy who can remember at least 20 plus names back before COVID hit when you gave them to give a presentation.
Yeah, well, that was a system I learned because, yeah, that was another that wasn't something I learned from Dr. Franklin, but I did it one time, actually. Well, I mean, I had a horrible memory for names, and so I went to a seminar and I bought the person's, back then it was tapes, cassette tape albums. Again, it's almost 40 years ago now, but I learned how to do it. And once I did, it made a huge difference for me in terms of, again, just my effectiveness with people, when you can remember people's names. And I started teaching that, and what I would do for many many years, I was known that for when I would do a talk, and back then most of my talks were on endless referrals. I would start out by, as people were coming in the door, I would go around the room and just kind of introduce myself to them. They didn't know why I was doing it, but I did. And I'd start out by having all the people in the audience who I had a chance to meet and exchange names with, I'd ask them to stand. And then I'd go around the room and I'd call back their names, having them take their seat. So I would do, so it could be anywhere from 25 to 45 or 50 people. And I'd usually get, pretty much all of them right. Every so often I'd miss one or two, but that was always a way to demonstrate that if you had a system, you could pretty much do anything, because there was no one worse when it came to remembering or forgetting people's names than I was. But once I learned a system for it, then it became something I could do. You know, to this day, I personally define a system, because you hear me talk about systems a lot. I define a system as simply the process of predictably achieving a goal based on a logical and specific set of how to principles. The key being predictability. In other words, if it's been proven that by doing A, you'll get the desired result of B, then you know that all you need to do is A and continue to do A and continue to do A. And eventually you'll get the desired result of B. So whether you're learning a system for remembering people's names, or you're learning some of Dr. Maxwell's great leadership principles, because I know you're a certified Maxwell speaker, I believe, and or whether you're learning a speech for Toastmasters, which I know you've done exceptionally well in Toastmasters. It's, if you can follow a system for doing so, you're going to cut your learning curve time and be a lot more effective.
Yes, sir, indeed. Yes, sir, indeed. And you're definitely right. Like that's so powerful. Heck, it reminds me of one of the earlier episodes of the show when one of our guests mentioned that if you're not in business if you don't have a system.
Exactly.
Yep, because it's so true. It's like, especially when it gets to that inner muscle memory status too, where you just use the system without even thinking about it.
hmm Yeah.
So my goodness, so since this is far from your first rodeo, is there a question that you wish you'd be asked more often?
No, I don't think so. Not, none that come to mind for me anyway. Just, it's always, I think, fun to continue learning about life and learning about people. Yeah, I'm a big student of human nature, because when you think about it, what's more important than really understanding human nature, since that's who we're dealing with all the time. So, and so you think about it, it's so important. What is human nature? The general psychological feelings, beliefs, commonalities, traits of humankind, those things that, while we're all individuals, we all have commonalities as well. And the more we can understand those commonalities, and understand what drives people in general, where we sort of begin 9 steps ahead of the game in a 10-step game.
Yes, sir, indeed. Yes, sir, indeed. Because it's so true. It's like, yeah, you're definitely right. It's like, yeah, we all have our snowflake swag where we're all special, but at the end of the day, there's gonna be some commonality between people. Everybody has certain habits that they like to stick to.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, sir, indeed. So, with all these wonderful books that you've published, I heard that you prefer to have the books already written since you prefer to speak as opposed to writing. So, any tips for the person out there who may be listening, looking to write and publish a book, but writing may not be their strongest asset or their
Yeah,
strongest
well,
skill?
I mean, yeah, I mean, that's a great point, because what I've said is I don't like writing books. I like having written books. In other words, I like it to be over, right? The writing process is not my favorite process. Now, all of the books I've written before the Go Giver series, which are 4 books that I co-authored with John David Mann, all the books I wrote before that and the books I've written since then have I've written them myself, and I can't say I ever enjoyed the process of writing. Now, with the Go Giver, it was different, because John was really the lead writer and storyteller. He's a brilliant. Now, here's a guy who loves to write. Okay, so that was a much different experience. But yeah, with the how-to books that I've written, yeah, I can do it, but boy, it's not something that is it's not my sweet spot. It's not it's not my state of joy, right, that I want to be in. But I think it's one of those things. If you want to do it badly enough, you're going to do it. Or if you want the results, then you're going to do the work. That said, there's still somewhat of a system when it comes to writing that makes it much more doable. I mean, if it's a how-to book, you're really starting out with the title, and then and the title is typically short and sweet. The subtitle is typically a little bit longer and more descriptive of what the book's about. You'll write an introduction first, and the reason for the introduction is because it's in the introduction that you really tell the reader, and just as importantly yourself, what the book is really all about. If you I remember reading a book by Mortimer Adler called How to Read a Book. And one of the things he said that I thought was so valuable, he said, if you ever read an introduction, or whenever you read an introduction to a book, somewhere in there, the author will tell you why he or she wrote the book. What's the purpose of it? What is it they want you to take away from it? What's the major premise? And every time, and I used to kind of get bored when I'd read introductions. Let's get through this and get to the actual chapter one. But since I read that in his book, I've always enjoyed reading introductions because I always wanted to see, okay, where is it that the writer's going to tell us exactly what this book is about and why they wrote it. Well, it's the same when we write the introduction. We're writing it to really discover what it is we really want to say. So once you get past the introduction, then it's really the deciding on the chapter titles, which is your table of contents. And then what I would do is I'd start out writing one paragraph, the opening paragraph for every chapter. Because again, what are you going to do? You're going to establish the premise of the chapter. You're going to be giving the reason for that chapter in that first paragraph. Once you've got all that, now start writing, right? Now start filling in the blanks and so forth. And again, don't try to write the entire book in a week. I mean, it's just not going to happen unless you're someone who can do that and takes joy out of that. And even that, it's still very difficult. But no, do a page a day, or 2 pages a day, or X number of words a day. I've seen people do it, both ways, and do it one bite at a time as opposed to trying to eat the whole thing.
That's right, indeed. That's right, indeed. Gotta eat the elephant one bite at a time. Heck, a lot easier too. I don't think anyone, at least any human mouths, are big enough to eat a whole elephant all at once. That'll be interesting to see if it was actually out there. Oh my goodness. Well, coming down to the magical question that every guest gets to receive, and that is if you were to wake up tomorrow and you were 25 again, but this time in 2021 with all of your knowledge and experience, what advice would you give to yourself?
Oh, wow. I mean, I think if I could ever go back and give my 25-year-old self any advice, it would be to shut up, stop talking so much, and listen a lot more. Uh, I would most likely tell myself, Berg, you don't know anything, right? You don't know anything close to what you think you know, and most of what you're pretty sure is, what you do know is totally wrong. So, in other words, I really kind of felt at that time like I understood what I needed to be successful, and I was way off base. I thought I understood how the world worked. I really thought I understood human nature and and knew why people thought what they thought. And I thought I could read minds, and I thought you really knew it, and I didn't. And so I would advise the 25-year-old me to really go into learning mode a lot earlier.
There we go. Another piece of rock solid advice, baby. That's what I'm talking about.
Thank you.
Yes, sir, indeed. Yes, sir, indeed. Because it's so true. And heck, even some folks, as the age, sometimes the whole listening advice is still applicable.
Yeah. Ain't that the truth?
But hey, at least the talking habit paid off. You get paid to speak, so at least it worked out in the end. Oh, man. Well, for those who want to keep in contact with you and check out all of your wonderful books and all the wonderful stuff you have to offer, what's the best way for folks to reach out to the brilliant Bob himself?
Oh, thank you. I would just say to visit Burg, and that's BURG.com, and just hang around the website and have some fun. There's a whole bunch of resources there you can find. And I look forward to connecting.
Sweet. Well, there you have it, folks. Head over to Burg.com. It's going to be all in the wonderful show notes. Indeed, buy all of his books. They're all extra fabulous. That's why they're multiple colors. You can have a rainbow of awesomeness on your shelf. That'll help you
Thank
become
you.
better than before, folks. Yes, sir, indeed. And he responds to everything, too. So you could tell that he's a high performer because he responds to everybody, and he's a great dude.
Thank you.
So, any parting words before we close up shop?
No, I just want to wish everybody a terrific 2021. May we get past this pandemic sooner rather than later and get back to living life and being productive and make it a great year.
How's it going, you super special, awesome human? Since you made it to the end of this episode, it looks like you really enjoyed yourself. Since you enjoyed this episode, be sure to share it with at least 3 people in your network and tell them what you really liked about this episode.